serving as a form of epilogue for my previous video on the three Spideys, Tom, Andrew, and Toby from Marvel Legends and the scathing things I had to say. I now wanted to make my case, put on my attorney suit, and really defend my stance, my prior stance at least, as to why it is that I think that maybe spending a little bit of extra money on the Figuarts is probably the better route. At least for the majority of our exhibits here, Exhibit A, B, and C, Toby, Andrew, and Tom, because it's not necessarily as a clear cut or as a full turkey, if you will, across the board, because there's a couple of variances between the three figures here where I have to be objective and kind of give credit where it's necessarily due, whether it be on the camp of Figuarts and Legends. So here we're going to have a very clear-cut comparison between the three main Spiders, Toby, Andrew, and Tom, minus one little discrepancy that is pretty obvious here, which frankly I need to tackle here first head on, is going to be, of course, the Tom Holland figures, because in this specific case, I happen to only have the final suit version that just recently came out for the Tom Holland Spider-Man from No Way Home. I do not have the integrated final battle version. Even though I know I have my methods of acquiring it, I just feel like it's just too far past. People already know exactly what they're dealing with that Marvel Legends. I just don't really have it in my possession. And then over on the Figuarts camp regarding the Tom Holland version, we kind of have the inverse. We have the final battle integrated suit version right here, but we don't necessarily have a final suit version just yet. It's actually still set to come out next year. I believe it's somewhere between March and April here in the States, but probably a month or two earlier if you happen to be getting it across seas. Might be a little earlier, might be a little later, but it's somewhere around the springtime that final suit version. But I will still argue that this guy will do if Figuarts decides to take a page from the Marvel Legends handbook and simply just do a repaint of this existing version, because if that's the case, then I still have my things to say as far as that comparison is concerned. The first two that I wanted to tackle were going to be the Toby figures, since I technically started not just the 3 Marvel Legends video from the last one with Toby, but also my entire run with the Figuarts themselves. Toby was the first one that captured my attention, and it's also the one that I feel makes the most compelling case as far as why it is that you have to wait for the Figuarts, in my opinion. Though looking at it from a surface level, you can see that the blue and maybe even the red is much more accurate on the Marvel Legends. I will give it credit to that, especially if you're going for an aesthetic that feels more at home with a classic suit Spidey, and if you prefer the look of him from Spider-Man 2 and forward. So Spider-Man 2, 3, and then of course his appearance in No Way Home. Because if you guys remember a little vividly, his suit in the first Spider-Man movie was a bit on the muted side. The red was kind of closer to what we had in the Marvel Legends, but that blue was strangely muted in some scenes. I don't know if it was the cinematography behind the film scenes that he appeared in, but something about the blue and a couple of scenes here and there in Spider-Man 2, he looked just a little too dark. If you need a little bit more visual proof, go and watch the train sequence from Spider-Man 2. Even a couple of shots there during that particular set piece, you can see that his blue gets kind of muted out, and my guess would have to be the green screening. They have to key out the blue, and that caused a little bit of a desaturation effect on the blue for his suit. And I feel like maybe Figuarts leaned a little bit too much towards that hue with their version. Outside of that, and potentially the scale, since we're going for that 5.5-inch scale with Figuarts versus the flat 6-inch for the Marvel Legends, I'm sorry, but look at the proportions and look at the accuracy on the detail and that webbing on the Figuarts. It's not so much silver as it is that gun-brushed metal black that we see on the webbing that is much more accurate to his version on screen. It's not necessarily just a flat-out silver, like a chrome-plated silver like it is in the Marvel Legends. You have the web pattern that is just a little bit more laser-focused. The texturing behind the honeycomb design on both the red and the blue is a little better on that of the Figuarts, of course. You can barely even really see any of it on the blue. Really good on the red, but any of the blue on the Marvel Legends is a little bit much more smoother than I would have liked it. But to me, I think what really does it is, like I said, the proportioning. You have the actual body proportions to that middle-aged Tobey Maguire happening a little bit much more friendly on the Figuarts than that of the Marvel Legends. Of course, you get what you pay for. But to me, the home run is that head sculpt. Christ, Just look at it. Oh my god. I think it's pretty evident here. I really don't think I need to say anything more. Look at that head sculpt. Jeez. It's a night and day difference. In my opinion, that is necessarily where the money goes to. You can see it right here. Just which one looks better. And yeah, you could say that a lot of you are probably typing in the comments right now. Yeah, of course that comes without saying. This is a $90 figure. This is a $25 figure. I'd rather save my money, get the 25. But at the same time, if you keep doing this, then you're just going to settle for this. Whereas over here, at least if you're not as OCD prone as I am, at least make an exception. I'm not necessarily saying get all three in Figuarts form and spend somewhere north of like $200, but at least make an exception for the Spidey that speaks most to you. And if Toby is that guy, do it with the Figuarts. And hey, if you happen to be some kind of custom paint artist or whatever, you can do something about the blue later on. And then the spider symbols, though they did a pretty adamant job here with the Marvel Legends. You can see that the spider symbol on his chest is almost 1-to-1 of that of the Figuarts. But when we rotate it towards the back, the way that it's kind of cut and just stretched out on the Marvel Legends, and then whenever you kind of bend this right here, you kind of see it bleed on through right there, and it just looks pretty awkward versus that of the Figuarts. I'm not saying that they necessarily did a leaps and bounds a better job, but at least it flushes a little bit better, especially with just how much friendlier the articulation is here, which I'm not necessarily going to tackle one-to-one just like I did before, because like I said, I've already done full-on reviews of this Figuarts and even the Marvel Legends in that last video, so I'm not going to go beat by beat exactly where the articulation is going to fare best. Just know that Figuarts prize themselves in their jointage, and if I had to actually come up with a complaint, is that with Figuarts, you do have a couple of those joints that kind of stick a little bit over time. For me specifically, it would have to be this left top arm joint that you can kind of hear a little bit squeaking and give me a little bit of resistance, even though technically it should be able to spin right around. So it kind of just tightened up with the act of motion. But that's more than what I can say for me personally than Marvel Legends, where certain joints were just not moving just straight up right out of the box, and even after heating them up a little bit with that hairdryer like I mentioned before, where you have the butterfly joints and the inward parts of the shoulder joints just barely moving at all, and having some of the knees have to be, like I said, brushed up with that hairdryer or some boiling water to get them to actually unstick. That, and now looking at it much more closely, something that I did not mention in that prior review, his arms don't really lay flush to the sides of his body. They just kind of stick out like so. Whereas with the Figuarts that I just dropped, at least you have much more neutral stability with a neutral pose like so. Or, like they kind of, like I said, pride themselves in, you can really get him into a variety of poses that complement the proportions much better, especially when you put him in like an in-action pose. A sentiment aided by, of course, the added hand accessories, which I've already covered with Toby here, where all he has is really what he comes on person here, which is the fists and the clenched hand, and then the two web spinning hands. I really don't need to say any more than that with the Figuarts, because of course they're going to throw in fisted hands, web spinning hands, wall crawling hands, neutral open hands, and then of course, yes, those pointing finger hands to replicate the meme. It's just kind of a given that Figuarts is going to excel in that territory, but I would argue they go even further by giving us not one, but two unmasked heads, an unmasked neck piece so that it looks much more natural, and just overall a better painted one, at least for the smiling one. The neutral one, I'd argue, does look a little melt-facedy, but at least it looks like an older Peter Parker. I can definitely see the likeness to Tobey Maguire in current age with the shorter hair, the slight little wrinkles, and the paint applications to make him look just slightly a little bit more haggard, but that is the trademark Tobey Maguire smile on the alternate head, and like I said, that extra neck piece just adds a little bit of nuance and detail to give him a lifelike kind of performance inside of a 6-inch scale, or at least close to a 6-inch scale. Whereas the Hasbro, well, I'm not gonna mark it too much down because it is meant to be a Marvel Legends alternate head sculpt, and they did what they could. But somebody online pointed out that this is kind of mimicking a little bit of the technology that they used for that selfie series. And I can't help but feel like maybe that's what they did. They propped in an image of a young Tobey Maguire and they printed this out. And that's essentially what we got instead of a handcrafted alternate head sculpt. It's not a bad one. I definitely still see Tobey Maguire's likeness there. But I mean, come on. Come on. Again, you can see where the money goes. And if that wasn't enough, instead of just giving us those web strands that came in the original 3-pack, and this speaks for all of the Spideys, not just Toby, but instead of throwing in, sure, the redundant web accessories that we've seen time and time again and just packing them in, just toss them into the box, they didn't do that. You get the alternate heads and the hands, but you don't get web strands. On the 3-pack, you get the web strands and the hands, but no heads. It's one or the other. It's always a goddamn compromise with Marvel Legends. Figuarts, take the heads, take the hands, take the web strands, take alternate pieces to be able to swap out the lenses in certain Spideys, not all Spideys, but certain ones. Come on. Like I said, the package value speaks for itself. Now that package value may be just a little bit strained when we get to our next Spidey, which will be the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, aka the Amazing Spider-Man. Admittedly, we do have a couple of more discrepancies with this guy than that of Toby, but still, the Figuarts manages to make a name for itself, an argument that still holds a little bit of weight. Sure, you still have a much smaller scale, a little bit on the shorter and less lankier and maybe a little less muscular side. I would even argue that, like I mentioned in that review, he's a little pudgy looking. I don't know what it is, but the proportions I feel weren't as strong as they were with Toby on the Figuarts rendition, and I don't necessarily feel all too adamant about the reflectiveness of the red on his suit, but still, the detail that they managed to etch out with the webbing, the symbols on both the front and the back, and the actual hue color I feel is a bit more complementary on the Figuarts than that of the Marvel Legends. The blue, I feel like it's kind of neck and neck. It's kind of like a preference thing. But the red, despite, like I said, not liking the reflective sheen, I think it's the right hue, a much more accurate hue than that of whatever we got going on right here. Where, like I said, some people might prefer this red hue, like the blood-looking kind of red, but it's a little too desaturated for my taste as far as replicating that accurate Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit. As far as head, I'll have to give this one over to the Marvel Legends. I do like that it's much more oval and accurate-like as opposed to the bulbous, very floaty Figuarts. That's something that I mentioned in that initial review. But of course, you're going to have an awful lot of other trappings as far as the premium quality of the joints and the plastic that service the Figuarts better and is trademark for them. Plus, like I mentioned before, you're going to have much more hand accessories, web strand accessories to be able to complement posability on this guy. But as far as giving us something that complements the Marvel Legends, yeah, like I said, you're going to have an awful lot of strengths still working in favor of the Figuarts. Somebody pointed out in the video before that the back symbol is actually a little too high up, and now I cannot unsee it. It is touching the red parts here on his back, and whoever commented that, yeah, you're right. It is a little too high. What the hell? Whereas here in the Figuarts, you can see that it's adequately placed. And you can argue that he's a bit more buffed out and really strongly physiqued here on the Marvel Legends, but despite my quarrels with the pudginess slightly going on here on the crotch area for the Figuarts, I feel like it's speaking a little bit more accurately to what we had going on with Andrew, especially when we come to like the shoulder area and towards the back, especially highlighted by that back symbol. That's where I realized that, yeah, they might have over-buffed this guy out, especially when you do swap the head and put on the Andrew head. Even though I love the Andrew head, I feel like it's one of the most accurate ones we got going for the Marvel Legends version here. The body is a little weird looking, especially since we know that Andrew Garfield wasn't necessarily that jacked. But hey, again, I have to give credit where credit is due. At least they threw in an Andrew Garfield head with a little bit of legal hoops they had to jump with, as opposed to whatever Figuarts had going on with them, because unfortunately they didn't come with an alternate Andrew Garfield head. At least in the final result. Initially there were plans, but it looks like negotiations kind of fell through, and they decided to not pack it in. So, even though I can tell it's not going to work, I want to take the Andrew Garfield head and put it on top. It's not going to work because the peg is just way too small to hold it in place. You can see right there, just kind of lays there. But, yo, if you don't touch it, just kind of leave it there. Hello. This is legit. What does that kid in the meme say? This is legitness. Yeah. This is actually kind of legitness. Maybe, shrink don't put him in any kind of like fighting poses, because then it looks like he's shrugging. If maybe you kind of press the arms down and just kind of flush them a little better to make them look a little, right there. If maybe this was just a little on the elevated side, because like I said, it kind of speaks to the lanky physique that Andrew Garfield is known for, right about right there, floating in place, that looks legitimately awesome. But sadly, unless you can customize or 3D print some kind of peg to put on top of the smaller peg and have this be kind of serving as an adapter and then putting the Andrew Garfield head on top to kind of keep it in place right about right there, honestly, no promises. But if somebody out there can do that, hey, hit me up. I might just PayPal you or commission you to make that happen. Because right here, it's almost there. It's just laying a little too low to have it be accurate and just kind of have it resting there. It looks like he's shrugging or he's slouching. Whereas if we raise it just a little high, right about right there, that's almost a miniaturized Andrew Garfield Spidey. Oh man, oh man, oh man. So you can see right there that there's an awful lot of gray area. Tobey is still leading the pack, but as far as the comparisons versus the Figuarts are concerned, but Andrew Garfield is definitely putting up a fight as far as where the Figuarts compares to the Marvel Legends. For posterity, I'm just going to leave the Andrew head right there because it's actually kind of cool. So let me put these off to the side so we can finally tackle the Black Lamb out of this entire family, which of course is going to be Tom, the major oddball here, especially since, unfortunately, like I said, we're going to be comparing completely different suits, and I totally understand if maybe a little bit of validity in this comparison gets lost here and you feel like this isn't fair, you want to click out of the video, that's okay. That's fine. Like I said, there's only so much that I can do. I don't have the Marvel Legends of the final battle integrated suit, but likewise, Figuarts has not released the final suit version of this specific Tom in this incarnation. So this is the best that I can really do. Plus, in my opinion, like I said right now, because of the amount of screen time, I would argue that I have much more of a bias for the integrated suit versus that of the final suit. The final suit, I either need to see another movie with him full on wearing the suit and not switching suits constantly like he has done in all three of his movies, or we need to get that Hot Toys in hand, because I feel like that's probably going to be the most accurate way to get a proper look at that suit with all the little details. I don't feel like a Marvel Legends is necessarily going to do us justice as far as where we can rank this design of the suit and where I like it, because that scene is, like I said, in my opinion, just way too short. As far as actual design, yeah, like I said, it leans towards subjectiveness. Some people like the gold spider that also complements the black and red. Others like the red and blue with the classic symbol that, like I said, takes inspiration from both the Tobey and the Andrew and even the Tom and melds them all together, something that even I feel with those symbols. But Marvel Legends really screwed the pooch when it came to this specific iteration, because like I said, the joints just feel gummy, they feel terrible. Something that I forgot to mention in that original video is that you can't even have the legs straight without causing this gap in the drop down joint. If you want to cover that gap up, his legs are now put at an angle, so he either has to be open leg like so, or you can flatten them down, but then you have these really wide areas, this gapage happening between the hip and the top leg joints. That's audacious, if you will. That combined with, like I said, all the other problems I had, the little QC problems, the bulbous, really inaccurate and really weird looking head, and just overall the quality of the plastic utilized here for printing, I thoroughly believe that this was a rushed job. Unfortunately, I feel like the same thing happened with the Figuarts, because if you look at the actual physique of the body, yeah, something really weird is off about that shoulder and chest area. It looks like this entire bracket here is just one amalgamous piece that is just kind of overtaking the physique of the body, but they didn't really do much to actually make the head proportionate to that it just looks completely off in a very neutral position. You can see just how much of a progress Figuarts really made between this guy, back when he was released, and then the eventual releases, despite, like I said, the legal hurdles they had to jump through to get Figuarts Tobey and Figuarts Andrew on hand. You could see just how much work went into the design of these guys to make them look a bit more accurate and truthful to how they were represented on screen. The Figuarts Tom here in the final battle suit version, doesn't necessarily really relay that message, because you could see just how wide the shoulders are, just like I said, how monstrous the chest piece really feels, both on the front and most especially on the back. The way that his latimus dorsi here, as well as the trap area, it's just way too huge. And then, like I said, you get to the skinniness of the arms and the legs. Actually, the legs are not so bad in my opinion, but it's this whole top area that just looks really off, which is a shame because the paint applications utilized for the gold trimming, the red, the black, the texturing work happening with the paneling to make it look like a very futurized suit that's a combination of both Tom's modifications and Tony's from the prior movies. You know, they did some really hefty work here that looks kind of neat. It's just that proportioning wise, I don't know who was in charge of assembling this thing, but they didn't really think twice to look at this guy and be like, yeah, that's Tom's body. Now, to come to the defense of the Figuarts, much like with the prior two Toby and Andrew Figuarts, at least posability and the actual feeling of the articulation, especially with the added joints that you get for the price that you're paying, especially the toesies, the extra shoulder pieces that allow the mobility of the arms to go vertical, the hinge inside and the butterfly movement that can allow the flexibility of the arms to go forward. It really does a number of almost seemingly miracles to make sure that at least the proportions kind of just start to fade into the background, especially when you get this guy in a web swinging pose or in a fighting pose, or if you then take the accessories into account, which are of course repeated here with the added hand accessories, web spinning hands, open hands, and then of course those pointing hands, the web strands, and unlike the prior two Spideys, you get some additional lens accessories to be able to swap out the different kind of emotions to make sure that you kind of breathe a little bit of life into this Tom Holland version. And that combined with, like I said, so many little features that are very trademark of Figuarts, at least do a serviceable job of making the figure kind of build a level of charm that, yeah, it still looks a little ugly around the chest area, but for the price of what is typically about between 85 to 90 bucks, I'm probably going to piss some people off here, but at this point, if Figuarts simply just takes this specific buck and just repaints it with the final suit of this guy right here, yeah, that's another 90 bucks for me. I'm sorry, but it's going to have to do it. Another 90 bucks from me if all they really do is just take what works here as far as posability, as far as, like I said, the added accessories of the web strands, the extra hands, and then being able to actually swap out the lenses from the inside to make sure to give them different emotions and different looks to then favor those poses. That's already doing a leaps and bounds over the Marvel Legends. But that's already just taken into account if they simply just do a simple repaint. Judging from some of those promo shots, I'd argue that maybe, just maybe, if they can just utilize, or I should say learn from their mistakes of this guy and actually give us what they kind of managed to do here with Toby and Tom, even if we don't get an alternate head with the Tom likeness, that would actually work even better. That they learn from the mistakes, give us the proper proportions of what we got going on right here, but with the technologies of favoring the articulation, the joints, and the added hand accessories and web strands. That's an automatic day one cop from me for that Figuarts. And here's the thing. I would even go as far as to say that they could go ahead and keep that Tom likeness because they didn't necessarily hit it out of the park the first time either. Alright, yes, as inaccurate as the Marvel Legends is, because I feel like he just looks way too babyface. Again, like I mentioned in that original video, I feel like he looks more like Jacob Tremblay than he does Tom Holland. At least he looks human. Yeah, oh god, the Tom Holland that we got from the Figuarts, I can see how they were trying. He looks like one of those botched wax dolls that you see at like Madame Tussauds that has the little plaque saying it's Tom Holland, and yet you're like,
are you sure about that?
Yeah, I mean, they got the hairdo right, and even the paint applications behind his specific brown inside of that hair. And I appreciate the added head accessory with the battle damage and the scarring and the blood kind of pouring from the side and the scrapes on his cheek and brow. And then, of course, I'm welcoming the added neck piece to be able to make it much more accurate whenever he takes off the mask, just like they did with Toby. But what is going on with that brow, that mouth, the eyes? Again, speaking to how far we've come with Figuarts. Yeah. Please, if you're going to do another Tom Holland head sculpt with that final suit version, learn from your mistakes, get your technology right, give us a head sculpt that worked the way that Toby did, and we'll be happy, because otherwise, y'all can keep that. You can, yeah, no legal troubles here. Just do what you did with Andrew. Just give us a flat out, really good, proportionate sculpt on the final suit version of the Tom Holland Spidey with the right articulation, the right posability, the hand accessories, the web strands, and we'll be golden. And so there you have a very biased comparison between the recently released No Way Home Marvel Legends Spider-Man figures, Toby, Andrew, and Tom, versus their mostly Figuarts counterparts. Again, the minor little flaw between comparing the integrated suit versus the final suit, but I still feel like even if they take the integrated suit version that you see before you here and just repaint it with the final suit or the final swing suit that you get on the left here with Marvel Legends, that's all they really even have to do to already automatically be better than Marvel Legends. Which means that, yeah, I'm still standing by my case. If you're going to really want some premium quality figures in this scale, you're going to have to pony up a little bit of extra cash for the Figuarts. Yes, they're still not going to be perfect. You're still going to have some issues, a couple of flaws here and there, depending on whether it's your specific unit or Figuarts ever so often coming up with something that is just really mind-boggling, like the recent Green Goblin eyes on the unmasked head. I don't know what the hell was going on with there, but at least when it comes to their Spideys, I would feel like their batting average is a bit more on the favorable side. Plus, you can see exactly just how far the company has come from their beginnings with the integrated suit here and those disproportionate chest plates, versus what we ended up getting with Toby and Andrew. Despite not getting a proper Andrew head sculpt, I still feel like there's an awful lot going for the posability, the articulation, and then of course you get no compromises, no budgings as far as the extra hand accessories, the web strands. Even though they're a little bit repeated and they're very easy to turn out, at least they're goddamn including them in the box for that flat rate fee, that price that they always charge. Meanwhile, Marvel Legends, they're escalating. You get figures that are like 25, sometimes even 30 or 35, like the Advanced Suit 2.0 from the Spider-Man 2 video game, that still have the same accessories, and you don't really have, increased price. Sometimes you just get a flat out repaint. I don't know what the hell was going on with right there. And even outside of the Spideys, yeah, you're still going to have your little, mind-boggling decisions that they made with that Green Goblin, for example. But we still got an awful lot coming down the pipeline that still piques my interest, whether it be the Keaton Batman or the 2099 Spider-Man Miguel O'Hara. You still have an awful lot of things out there that still pique my interest, and if they can only get better with their technology that they have proved they can do in the case with Toby, then I still am willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I understand that at the end of the day, me, as well as everybody who's watching this video and everybody who collects Spider-Man figures, needs to do the most rational thing and simply just vote with your wallets. However, if you are already ready to vote, there are going to be affiliate links for literally all of the Spidey men that you see before you here, whether they be from Marvel Legends or SH Figuarts, if you guys want to use those links to help out the channel and also get your own figures in the process. And again, like I said, vote with your wallets. Really go with what speaks to you. If you feel like the Marvel Legends on Andrew Garfield here is better than the Figuarts, go with that one. But if you feel like the Figuarts packs more of a punch for Toby than it does with Marvel Legends, do that as well. Try to let go of your OCD like I am trying to learn to do every single day. Trust me, I'm trying to swallow my own advice, and it is difficult, but I'm hoping that putting it in video here at the end is serving as a form of like a journal entry to remind myself to really not be a prisoner of my own design and really collect what speaks to you and don't feel the need to spend the money where you don't need to. With that said, appreciate you guys for watching. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up. If not, hit the thumbs down. And as always, stay humble. I'll see you later.